Recording in progress.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. And today, it's really just about answering your questions about written test one. All right. I'll try to monitor the chat panel as well, but maybe if you got any question, please just feel free to speak up. I think that'll be easier for me. All right, go ahead. Questions. Maybe just before you ask, I will show you just once more. So of course, if you see the E-class, there was one announcement I made just to say, for the practice question I gave to you. So there is a past review session that's held in the summer. It's basically going over the same set of questions. If you just want to have a walkthrough about the solutions, you can also feel free to check it out. So you can definitely see the link from the E-class, but if you want to find from the lecture site, it's also very easy. All you gotta do is go to the 2030 back in the summer. All right, over here, okay, the summer, and then you will see around here there is the written test 1 review session over here. It's around lecture 11, 12, around that area, right? You will see written test 1, and then we actually got the recording, we got the notes over here, right? If you couldn't find the E-class announcement, this is an alternative way to find it. But today, if you want me to revisit certain parts of the lecture, I'm more than happy to. All right, your questions. If you want to put your question on the chat, it's also okay. Now I'm also looking at the chat, just in case. If you feel more comfortable typing, that's fine. All right, let's see here. We do have one here. The orientation of the test will mainly be multiple choice, yes, and short answer, correct, yes. So if you double check the guide PDF, so it definitely confirms that, yes, primarily multiple choices. Lots of tracing. You gotta make sure you can do code tracing. That's for sure. It's going to be a primary part. Yes, you can bring a sketch paper with you, like for the previous test, but just make sure it's blank, and it should be okay. Just you can bring as many pieces as you like, as long as they're all blank. And of course, this particular test will be a written test, meaning that it will be over E-class. So you definitely have to bring your mobile phone for the dual mobile verification, right? That's also outlined in the guide. Are calculators allowed? No, I don't think you need it. No. Is it multiple choice, or will it be more than that? Yeah, primarily multiple choices. There might be parts where you may have to fill out maybe some short answer. But everything will be done over E-class. What is the best way of practicing code tracing? Well, basically go through the exercises example we did in the class, and then do the practice question. That's really the best way. I cannot think of a better way. So I think the way we kind of cover the material is really about visualizing code execution. That's really the best way. Even for your lab 0 part 1 and part 2, and also the required notes. So we really emphasize about visualization. So you got lots of chances there to learn about how to do tracing. All right, guys. So if you got any questions, don't need to feel shy. Okay. But of course, if you just want to go over the practice question solution, that review session is pretty good. All right, I can wait for maybe a few minutes, right? So if you guys still need some time to process the information, that's okay. I still got my office hour on Monday. So the call by value and dynamic type that we covered last week, right? So last week's lecture material definitely will be on the test, right? As we said earlier. So everything we said in the lecture on, if you're in section B, Monday, Wednesday, section G, Tuesday, Thursday, yeah, anything that we cover should may be covered in the test. You might be actually required to fill out some code, yes, like a Java code. It's possible, right? Again, check the guide, right? The PDF guide actually gave you some listing about what might be there. So one example about the short answer that could show up in the written exam. Okay, I can try to make it up one. Basically short answer is, something that's not really multiple choice, right? Let's see. One could be, for example, let me see. Let's say, for example, something like, I might say, assume the following method declaration. It could be something like maybe public and void, maybe gain weights, and over here, let's say double. Let's say it's in the person class. And then double, let's say some amount, right? You kind of grow the weights by certain amount, okay? And then you have some implementation here, okay? And the question could go like, write a line of Java code that grows. Let's say we have a person P1, okay, P1, which is a reference variable of type person. P1 weights by, let's say, 23.6, right? I'm making this up, right? And then over here, this will be a box for you to enter a line of Java code, right? So this one here, because we know it's P1, so that's a context object. So you got P1, and then you got growth weights. And then since we say 23.6, 23.6, right? And here I can be a little bit more tolerant. Either you got semicolon or you don't have semicolon. That one is okay, right? Just a line of Java code. So this apparently is not multiple choice, right? It's one possibility. But I would say don't worry too much about the format of the question themselves, right? Because I think you guys, all of us, have been using E-class ever since the pandemic. So we are pretty much used to what kind of format it could be, for quizzes. So I think I'm not going to use anything that's kind of not familiar to you. So it can be radio button, it can be check boxes for multiple choices, and then there might be some short answer box or enter some integer, things like that, right? But I think the most important thing is really about to study the contents of the cover materials. Yeah, of course, I'm kind of making this up, on my feet. So I'm just saying all the question you will see on the actual test can definitely be traced back to certain parts of the cover material, right? And I believe in your test guide, right? Also for you guys who are here, I can also show you one thing here, right? So in the guide, again, the guide itself is actually very useful. You should really check it out, right? It definitely says something like you want to get yourself familiar with the concepts covered in the Lab 0 part 1 and part 2, right? So for example, there are not really that many methods that we actually went over for Lab 0, so you want to get familiar with them. Sometimes I might simply say, so now for this question here, we assume methods are implemented as we cover in Lab 0, right? I might just briefly describe what the method should do, but the details will be something you should really understand, right? So Lab 0 is really something you have been doing, from scratch. So that's something I will definitely expect you to really review very thoroughly. Of course, I don't really expect to memorize about everything from Lab 0, but if I kind of mention about a particular method, for example, let's say add products, let's say, the add products method. If I say now assume the add product method is correctly implemented, then you should know that one there internally, you should really update the counter and update the array in certain way, right? All right. I think before Wednesday, you still have some time. You still got maybe take a break today, take some rest, and then tomorrow and also Monday, you can drop by my office hour if you want to, 6 p.m. And also, I think, so I think I still got a few days to really go over the concept. I definitely want to make sure you're proficient, you're smooth in tracing the Java code. And another thing that I think your fellow student, maybe from the previous term, they also kind of mentioned to me. So when you do your tracing practice, right? So usually you might already got a print out of the question on a piece of paper, and then you directly maybe should annotate, the code, like how I did it, on my iPad in the class. However, don't forget in the actual test, you will be presented the question itself on the screen. So, so if you see what I mean, so let's see this. So you want to get used to, for example, let's say if this is your computer screen, let's say this may be question 2, for example, right? So I kind of give you one fragment of code over here, and then I can ask you a certain question about it, which will require some tracing. So I think for you, of course, you're going to make sure you bring a piece of sketch paper, right? Sketch paper. And then I think you got 2 choices over here. It's completely up to you. Either you have to copy and paste, copy very quickly everything into over here, and then start tracing and annotating. And of course, if you practice enough, you might just be able to follow line by line over here directly on the screen, and then visualize accordingly on the paper, line by line. Okay. So this kind of stuff you may just want to also practice, before the test. I think the practice question I gave to you, I think quite a few does require some tracing. So you actually want to get used to it. All right, any more questions? An example of a tracing problem is there a particular one you want me to do? We got lots of them actually, in the lecture or in the tutorial. So is there a particular one you want me to do? Well, if you don't have any in mind, wow. So exceptions, okay. I can dig out, let's say, one of the example from your lecture, right? I can do one. Okay, why don't we do this one here? One moment. Okay, how about I'll do this one here? I'll copy that. Yeah, give me a moment. I'm just copying the example here. All right, how about this one here? Yeah, this one here, you definitely got exceptions over here. Okay, so let's say this, right? So let's say you're given this kind of this thing over here on the screen, let's say, right? So what you can do is, I cannot really split my screen on the iPad, but my point is, look at this one here on the screen, and then I'm just gonna trace one by one, right? So the way to do it is, you can think about, let me just say I got a piece of paper right here, all right? I got my piece of paper right here, and then I look at the screen contains this one here and also contains this one here. So how do I trace it? First of all, I look at the screen itself. I got some counter C, right? I kind of initialize it, so I can draw something on my paper right away. So I know that initially the C is pointing to a counter object right here, and the value, we know that by default is 0. All right, and then for this assertion over here, we just comparing the minimum value, which we know is 0, right? That's what we assume in the class, and compare with get value 0. So these two are the same. So that means assertion here is gonna pass, right? So you can just make some notes yourself. You can say initially the C dot value is simply equal to 0. So when you say assert equals, so the minimum value is 0, and also the actual value is actually 0. So it's going to pass, right? Of course, whether you write this down or not, it's completely up to you. I'm just trying to simulate, the sketch paper. And then we're going to the try block right here, right? And then we call this method C.increments. So if we step into it, we're going to step into this method here, right? And then when we step into it, so we're going to do this Boolean comparison. So this is something I can write down. So I basically got, okay, let me use a different color here. I basically got if the value for the counter is actually 0 and the maximum value is 3, right? So I actually got 0 equals 3, which I know is false. In that case, I know that exception is not thrown because I don't really execute that branch. All right, and then I'm simply just going to go to the else part. So if I go to the else part over here, right here, I'm just going to increment the value. So that one there, the value is going to go from 0 to 1. Okay, so 1 is the like a resulting value from this method call. So if I go back to the screen for this method call here, so from this method here, nothing has been thrown, specifically this exception. And then I go to this assert equals right here. And then I say assert equals. So I got the value 1 here. And also I got the value for C, which I know has been incremented from 0 to 1. So 1 here, and I know that obviously that one should pass because 1 that's expected matches the 1 that's actual, right? So once I get to here, so I know that it's a pass. So the catch is completely bypassed, right? So I intentionally try to keep these two fragments, clean because they were supposed to be on the screen, which you cannot annotate. So on your piece of sketch paper, you may just want to somehow jot down, all the, thoughts about how you kind of trace the program. So exactly how you draw the diagram, you can definitely make a reference to lots of examples that we went over in the tutorial, in the class. But you want to find out your own way to really trace efficiently. We don't really grade your sketch work, but you want to find out a way that's going to be both correct and efficient for yourself. Okay. All right, that's your tracing example. Of course, in the class, we actually did lots of them. Yeah. You're welcome. And just in case, if you're from section B, which will be on the Wednesday class, remember on Wednesday, my recording actually failed to actually save the recording, right? My recording kind of failed, but don't worry. Actually, I was able to actually cover just the same material on Thursday in section G. So if you go to lecture site, just go to section G, right? Or just go to your section there, click on the YouTube link. It has the recording. So if you want to review last week's lecture, it's already there. So we haven't missed anything. All right, guys, any more questions? So just in case you cannot make it to my office hour on Monday, which will be 6 p.m., in case it has any clashes with your classes, you can also feel free to approach me as ever, maybe after class. I'm happy to stay a little bit longer after class. We can also speak. If you got any question, you can ask me directly after class. We can talk too. So moving forwards, I would say before Wednesday, right? Before the test, because written test is a different format from the programming test. So I would definitely suggest your number one priority is to really go over all the cover materials, the slides, iPad notes, and any PDF written notes. Go over these first, right? So just make sure you're able to somehow do the same example, the kind of tracing or justification yourself. Try to do a little bit more active learning, not just to kind of think that you understand everything, right? That's a very good, very promising first step. But you also want to be able to redo, all the problems yourself. So that's why I also make the clean version of the iPad templates, to you. So you can either load them to your tablet computer, or you can print them out, just to practice. I would say do this one first. And then if you want to practice, you can definitely consider my practice question on the e-class. But they are only meant as examples. They may not actually appear verbatim. There might be other things, appearing on the test. So just take them as example. Don't think they will be exactly the test. Right. Okay, why don't we wait for 1 more minute just to see if you guys got any more questions for me. All right, so guys, if you have no further questions, maybe just plan your time, to do more study before Wednesday, and then you still have a chance to reach out to me for sure. All right, and then the recording I'll still post it, even though we haven't discussed that much, but I think I will still discuss some valuable stuff, just to in case you want to refer to them. All right, but I really appreciate you guys come. Okay. Yeah, your programming test. Yes. As I said, I already got a preliminary result from the TA. I'll need to process them over the weekend, including today. You can expect to hear back from me before Monday or Tuesday class. That's for sure. I'll definitely reach out to you with all the results. That's for sure. Yeah. All right. So if you no further question, let's call it a day. All right, thank you so much for coming. And then, guys, enjoy your weekend. And then I'll see you in class Monday or Tuesday. All right, be well.
I have one question, sorry.
All right, that's fine.
In this tracing example here, I see that like count like dot min value, dot max value, like there is no like that. It's not defined. So in the actual text, will we actually like see the definition?
Okay, yeah, it's a good question here, Noor. So I think in the actual test, of course, this is just like a quick example just to show your fellow student about how to do tracing. In the actual question, I will definitely mention any magic value, in this case minimum and maximum. I will say something like, recall in your lecture example where the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 3, things like that. You definitely, for those kind of detail, you don't have to memorize. What you have to be familiar, for example, would be, let's say, elapsed 0. When we spoke about that, like a refurbished shop example, right? So when we talk about like app products, how the product object will roughly look like, and that will be the kind of stuff you want to kind of be familiar, right? So I cannot really mention all the details in the actual question, but I might say recall back in your elapsed 0, part 1 and part 2. So these are certain methods that we try to implement. Now assume those methods are implemented the same way, and let's now do some tracing, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So you definitely safest bet will be in addition to the slides, your iPad notes, other notes, you want to go over maybe your code from lab 0, part 1 and part 2. Just go over it quickly, just to see what each method is supposed to do, the correct solution. All right. Good. All right, guys, thank you so much. All right, have a good day. I'll see you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.